on Márquez and Lovecraft, the terrible and the terrific. People don't remember you, they remember how you made them feel. You may not remember much about the books you had to read in high school, but you do remember how they felt. Authors are like that. One has the sweet, tart taste of a spring-born strawberry. Another is the black grit scraped off of burnt toast. When I read 100 Years of Solitude, I feel I am swept away by a current of enjoyable memories of relatively happy and determined people who live better lives by the day. The obscure fantasy elements serve the function of a small piece of candy to a child at a church service, pacification. The story is about family and community, and the talk of invisible potions and philosopher's stones titillate the imagination, but are never MacGuffins to center the plot around. The plot is fixed on character and choice. When I read Call to Cthulhu, language is twisted, and adjectives of ghastly nature don the page. I found myself made uneasy, not by the events of the story so much, but by the chosen words of the author. When an inspector of the police is spying through the Louisiana swamps on the primitives engaged in a voodoo orgy to a stone idol of Cthulhu, it's these choices of words that make my palms sweat. When the cult members are speaking of the day their great old one will rise, Lovecraft uses a frightful and unusual phrase, and all the earth would flame under a holocaust of ecstasy and freedom. If you are stunned and taken back that someone would use holocaust and ecstasy together in a sentence, then you feel as I did on my first reading. It is a very uncomfortable juxtaposition of ideas, in short, a train of thought. That, I believe, is the intended point. Yet horror has more than one face, and I believe I found a horror in Lovecraft's works that he did not intend so directly. Lovecraft is a racist. Despite the low-frequency use of the words nigger or negro, the phrase hybrid spawn, or men of a very low mixed-blooded and mentally abhorrent type, and mongrel celebrants brings its own scorn creatively down on the eccentric cultures Lovecraft was writing about at the time. This poetry of madness is truly terrible stuff beyond any imagined monsters or terrible fates, and therein lies its value. It's hateful, disgusting, and uncomfortable to read. It is the far end of the spectrum of how an author might make you feel. A visceral knot may develop in your stomach at the unapologetic phrases and low views of mankind Lovecraft will deliver with unflinching Nietzschean indignation. Got it. Just as powerful as H.P. Lovecraft's horror is the joyousness perpetuated in Gabriel Márquez's 100 Years of Solitude. Let's take a look at a few passages with a similar setting of men going through the wilderness towards some object, but see how the language is kept in its rhythm by commas and word pictures. The men on the expedition felt overwhelmed by their most ancient memories in that paradise of dampness and silence, going back before original sin as their boots sank into pools of steaming oil and their machetes destroyed bloody lilies and golden salamanders. All one sentence. For a week, almost without speaking, they went ahead like sleepwalkers through a universe of grief, lighted only by the tenuous reflection of luminous insects, and their lungs were overwhelmed by a suffocating smell of blood. When they woke up, with the sun already high in the sky, they were speechless with fascination. Before them, surrounded by fern and palm trees, white and powdery in the silent morning light, was an enormous Spanish galleon. Tilted slightly to the starboard, it had hanging from it intact mast and dirty rags of its sails in the midst of its rigging, which was adorned with orchids. The hull, covered with an armor of petrified barnacles and soft moss, was firmly fastened to a surface of stones. The whole structure seemed to occupy its own space, one of solitude and oblivion, protected from the vices of time and the habits of birds. Inside, where the expeditionaries explored with careful intent, there was nothing but a thick forest of flowers. This is how Márquez paints the swampy jungle, just as Lovecraft has done in the voodoo orgy scene. Yet Márquez injects his paintings with so much positivity in life. The passages are dense in the mentioning of living things, just as the jungle in the mornings and evenings would be. Look at all the biological examples referenced above. There are bloody lilies, golden salamanders, luminous insects, ferns, palms, trees, orchids, barnacles, and soft moss, birds, and lastly, a thick forest of flowers. We are propelled by romantic energy and comical shortcomings to read on and turn the next page. What outlandish trinket of gypsies or cockfight turned murder shall we find on the next leaf of Márquez's imagination? Listen again to the melody of this line. The whole structure seemed to occupy its own space, one of solitude and oblivion, protected from the vices of time and the habits of birds. You could tune a metronome to the rhythm of these passages. Beat for beat, beauty flows out of this book like the steady trickle of a Virginia stream. Márquez makes me feel hopeful for the next great grove of flowers, or that the virtues and perseverance of its characters will pay off for their dreams, hopeful that children will fall in love, and governments will fall without wars. These are powerful examples of works which use simple language techniques to communicate the complex subjective experiences of hope and fear. This is why I feel Márquez and Lovecraft belong as bookends to two polar ends of a spectrum of works of literature, both positive and negative.